So today is Monday, March 2, 2026. And if you follow the tech feeds, you probably saw the massive headline coming out of Irvine, California this morning.
Yeah, it's definitely making some waves today.
It really is. And if you're listening to this and you're like me, your first reaction was probably a mix of, intrigue and extreme skepticism.
Which is completely fair.
Right, because we're looking at a press release and some internal documentation from EON AI Ventures. And they're claiming to completely rewrite the timeline for how we learn and use AI.
And it is a massive claim. I mean, we aren't just talking about a new software update or a faster chip. We're talking about fundamental shift in how human beings actually interact with the economy.
Specifically, they're launching what they call the EON Entrepreneur School. And here's the hook that literally made me stop scrolling today.
Let's hear it.
They claim they can take a student, regardless of their technical background, by the way,
Right.
and guide them from absolute zero to a commercially launched income-generating business in just 90 days.
Yeah, that is the line that really jumps right off the page. Zero to revenue in 90 days.
It sounds wild. And look, we've covered a lot of revolutionary ed tech platforms on this deep dive before. Usually they promise to teach you, I don't know, Python in 6 months or how to become a data analyst in a year.
Sure, standard upskilling stuff.
Exactly. But 90 days to an actually launched business? That sounds dangerously close to get-rich-quick territory.
It does. It really does sound like that at first glance.
So the mission for our deep dive today is to strip away all that marketing fluff. We have their documentation, we have the methodology specs, and we need to figure out, is this actually possible or is it just a very expensive fantasy camp?
I think to really answer that, we have to ignore the 90 days part for just a second.
Okay.
And we need to look at the underlying problem they're claiming to solve. Because the source material calls it the crisis in AI education.
Which honestly feels a little strange to me.
How so?
Well, from the outside, it looks like an absolute boom, not a crisis. I mean, every university has an AI track now. You can't even log into LinkedIn without someone trying to sell you a prompt engineering course. So where exactly is the crisis?
Right. Well, the crisis isn't in the availability of education. It's in the utility of it.
The utilities.
The source material here makes a very sharp, very deliberate distinction between learning about AI and building with AI. And most of what exists right now, especially in academic institutions, is just the former.
So you mean the theory, like learning how a large language model works, the history of neural networks, that sort of thing?
Exactly. Or even just very basic application. The documentation actually refers to this as the sandbox trap.
The sandbox trap. I really like that term. What does it actually mean in practice, though?
So think about a typical computer science assignment. A professor gives you a data set. Let's say it's a spreadsheet of housing prices.
Okay.
It's completely clean. The columns are all perfectly labeled. There's no missing data. And the assignment is just build a model to predict next year's prices.
All right, it's a controlled environment. There's a very clear right answer and a wrong answer.
Precisely. And the student builds the model, they get an A, and they graduate. But here's the massive problem. The real world is not a sandbox.
Not at all.
Real-world data is messy, it's incomplete, it's contradictory. And when that straight-A student walks into a real company and faces a messy, chaotic supply chain problem, they just freeze.
Because they have the theoretical knowledge, but they don't have the context.
Right. They lack the contextual capability to solve a problem that hasn't been completely sanitized for them beforehand. They don't have a personal stake in it.
So we're basically churning out graduates who are excellent at solving problems that have already been solved, but they're totally helpless against problems that are actually unique.
That is the core argument EON is making here. They argue that traditional education is entirely theory-oriented, whereas the current economy desperately demands purpose-driven skills.
Which explains the disconnect with stakeholders,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Because the notes mention that governments are pouring funding into these curriculums, expecting massive economic dividends like new jobs, digital exports, and they're just not getting them.
And employers are frustrated too. They don't want to hire someone who can just explain how an AI model works on a whiteboard. They want people who can actually deploy AI to solve a specific bottleneck.
And obviously students are frustrated because they want a clear path to professional success, not just abstract knowledge that doesn't get them hired.
Right. And there's a specific metric in the text that I think is crucial to understanding why these businesses are so frustrated. They talk about the 80-20 reliability gap.
I saw that part. It says generic AI delivers 80% quality, but high-stakes operations require 100%. Let's unpack that because honestly, 80% sounds pretty good for a first draft.
Well, sure. I mean, in a creative writing class, an 80% is what, a B minus, it passes?
Mm-hmm.
But in business operations, 80% is an absolute catastrophe.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. Imagine an AI system for a logistics company that routes delivery trucks correctly 80% of the time.
Okay, yeah, that means 20% of your entire fleet is just lost or late or delivering to the totally wrong warehouse. You'd be bankrupt in a month.
Exactly. And this is the crisis. We have all these amazing tools right now, large language models, generative models, that can instantly get you to that 80% mark. They can write the boilerplate code, they can draft the basic email.
But that last 20%, the precision, the security, handling the weird edge cases, that's where the actual economic value lives.
Precisely. And traditional courses aren't teaching students how to bridge that gap. They just stop at the 80% because they're theoretical.
Because bridging that gap is hard. That is the actual grind. That's debugging. That's real-world testing. That's understanding the weird nuances of a specific business.
And that is exactly where the EON Entrepreneur School claims to be different. They are positioning themselves not as a place to learn theory, but as a manufacturing plant for that final 20%. They want active creation, not passive observation.
Okay, so let's pivot to the solution then. Because acknowledging the problem is one thing, but fixing it in 90 days is a totally different beast. How do they actually propose to do this? The document heavily emphasizes something called VibeFlow.
VibeFlow? Yeah, it sounds a little bit like a music playlist, doesn't it?
It really does. But the specs describe it as EON's structured AI-assisted development methodology. Now, be honest with me here. Is this just a fancy marketing word for we let you use ChatGPT?
No, it's significantly more structured than that. You have to think of VibeFlow as an infrastructure layer. In a normal traditional startup, you have a whole team. A CTO, a front-end developer, a back-end engineer, maybe a database administrator.
Right, it takes a village.
VibeFlow essentially automates the syntax and the underlying structure that those roles would usually handle manually.
So it basically handles the plumbing.
It handles the plumbing, the framing, and the electrical work. It allows the student to function as the architect of the project. The student provides the vision, the business logic, and the user requirements, and then the AI executes the actual code construction step by step.
But wait, if the AI is doing all the actual building, what is the student really learning? Are we just training people to be glorified prompt jockeys?
That is the most common criticism of AI education right now. But EON's documentation addresses this directly with their problem discovery framework. And this, to me, is the most fascinating part of their entire curriculum.
Why is that?
Because they explicitly forbid students from working on clean problems.
Right, I noticed that. The text says they actively target messy, financially constrained challenges.
They want friction. They want the student to go out into the real world, whether literally or virtually, and find a human process that is broken.
Like what?
Well, maybe it's a local dental office, where the receptionist spends 4 hours a day manually copying patient data from emails into a calendar system. Or maybe it's a local government office that's just drowning in PDF forms.
So the student isn't starting with a generic idea like, I want to build a cool app. They're starting with, I found a specific leak in productivity.
Exactly. And that is the skill that is truly future-proof. Syntax changes all the time. Coding languages go out of style. But the ability to look at a messy, chaotic human process and spot the inefficiency, that is a permanent economic skill.
So let's walk through the actual 90-day timeline. Let's say I enroll. I don't know how to code at all. But I know that, say, independent auto mechanics are terrible at managing their part inventory. That's my messy problem. What happens next?
You enter the VibeFlow environment, and you aren't just staring at a blank text editor hoping for inspiration. You are guided through a very strict structural analysis. It asks you, who is the actual user? What is their specific pain point? What happens if this fails? You define the logic of the solution. Then the AI components of VibeFlow begin to assemble the application layer based on your logic.
So instead of spending 6 weeks learning how to
Set up a database server, exactly.
Right.
You spend that time refining the user flow.
and testing the solution against reality, I imagine?
Yes. You go back to that mechanic, you show them the prototype you just spun up, they tell you, hey, this button is too small, or I don't have reliable Wi-Fi in the garage, so this won't work.
Oh, that's huge.
That is the feedback loop. You're using the 90 days to close that 20% reliability gap we talked about earlier.
Okay, so let's say by day 80 or so, I have a working tool.
Yep.
It solves a real problem for the mechanic. But here is where I get really stuck on the commercial launch claim in the press release.
The revenue part.
Yeah. Building a tool is one thing. Getting people to actually pay for it is entirely different. Most startups die because literally nobody knows they exist.
You've hit on the classic cold start problem. Distribution is usually the killer for any new business. And this is where EON pulls out what I would call their unfair advantage.
The platform numbers.
The platform numbers. Because EON isn't just a school popping up out of nowhere. It is an existing technology giant.
Right.
The source material lists 4,400 institutional customers and over 136 million users across 80 different countries.
That is just a staggering number of eyeballs.
It's a ready-made global marketplace. So when an EON student launches their venture, they aren't just putting a link up on a personal blog and hoping for the best. They're deploying directly into the EON ecosystem.
Wow, so if you build that inventory tool for mechanics and EON already services, say, vocational schools or trade networks globally,
Your product has an immediate path to millions of potential customers.
that completely explains the revenue claim. They are essentially vertically integrating the education in the marketplace. You build it in their shop, you sell it in their store.
Correct. And that ultimately defines their metric for success. In a traditional university, you succeed if you just pass the final written exam. In the EON Entrepreneur School, the source implies that graduation is contingent on the product actually working, meaning it has to generate real value.
It really pushes that concept of the proprietor mindset they talk about. You aren't a student asking for a grade from a professor. You're a founder asking for a sale from a customer.
And that psychological shift is massive for a learner. When your grade depends on whether a real human being finds your work useful enough to actually use it, you pay attention to details that you would completely ignore in a classroom.
Absolutely.
You care about the user interface, you care about the loading speed, you care about the actual why behind the software.
It's basically sink or swim, but with a life jacket provided by the AI tools.
That is a very good analogy, yeah.
I want to zoom out for a minute and look at the credibility of all this, because if a random startup launched today and said, hey, we can replace college in 3 months, I'd just laugh and close the tab.
Sure.
But EON AI Ventures is backed by the leadership of EON Reality.
And that context is absolutely vital here. EON Reality has been around for about 25 years. They are serious pioneers in VR and AR extended reality. They've been working with governments and top-tier universities on knowledge transfer for decades.
So they definitely aren't new to the education space.
No, not at all. And interestingly, their background in VR is highly relevant here. VR is all about simulation, right? Simulating a complex jet engine repair, simulating a dangerous surgery. They are taking that exact philosophy of learning by doing and applying it to AI software development.
They aren't just some crypto startup pivoting to AI because it's trendy this week.
No, they are a massive infrastructure company expanding their reach into workforce solutions.
There's actually a quote from their chairman, Dan Lidgerskar, in the press release that really struck me. He said, "The AI economy demands more than knowledge. It demands capability, outcomes, and impact."
Demands capability. That is the key phrase. The market has completely lost patience with pure potential.
It feels like a direct shot at the traditional degree, doesn't it? Like, I don't care what, show me what you can actually do.
It is a direct shot,
Yeah.
and it raises a very uncomfortable question for higher education. If a student can spend 90 days in this program and come out with a revenue-generating business,
Yeah.
and another student spends 4 years in a lecture hall and comes out with massive jet and just a theoretical understanding of algorithms, which one is actually educated?
Well, let's play devil's advocate for a second. Does this model have to threaten universities, or can they actually use it?
The documentation actually suggests an integration model. EON pitches this as a solution for universities, not just a competitor to them.
Oh, really? So a university could just license the EON school platform?
Exactly. Imagine a semester of entrepreneurship. You spend your first 3 years learning the broad liberal arts and theory, which is still highly valuable for critical thinking, obviously.
Sure.
But your final semester is this intense 90-day sprint. You leave college not just with a piece of paper, but with a launched global venture.
That would honestly make the degree worth the tuition again.
It bridges the gap. It solves that exact crisis we started with.
There is another angle here mentioned in the notes, too, the corporate accelerator.
Yes.
Oh.
And honestly, this might be even bigger than the university market. Think about a massive Fortune 500 company today. They are terrified of being left behind by AI.
Yeah, everyone is.
They have thousands of employees who know the business inside and out, but they don't know how to code.
So instead of firing them and hiring incredibly expensive AI specialists, You just put your own people through the 90-day school.
You upskill them, you take a mid-level manager in human resources,
Hmm.
and you say, go through this program and build a specific tool that fixes our recruiting bottleneck.
That is brilliant because that manager already knows where the bodies are buried, so to speak. They know exactly why the current system fails on a daily basis.
Precisely. They have the deep domain expertise. VibeFlow just gives them the technical expertise to execute on it.
Yeah.
Suddenly, your legacy workforce isn't a liability anymore. They are your actual R&D department.
It turns AI anxiety into AI agency.
AI agency.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. It removes the fear factor. Instead of worrying that some faceless AI will take your job,
Right.
you use AI to invent a much better version of your job.
Let's bring this all back to you, the listener, because we have a real mix of people tuning into these deep dives. Some are hardcore techies, some are totally non-technical. If this EON model works, if this active creation actually becomes the standard, what does it change for the average person trying to navigate their career right now?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the permission structure of the tech world has completely collapsed.
What do you mean by permission structure?
Well, for the last 30 years, if you wanted to build scalable software, you needed permission. You needed to be accepted into a rigorous CS program. You needed to spend years learning the arcane languages of C++ or Java.
Yeah.
You had to go out and find a technical co-founder. There were gatekeepers everywhere you looked.
Yeah.
Now, the only gatekeeper is your ability to spot a real problem. The barrier to entry has shifted from syntax to insight. If you are a nurse, a teacher, a construction worker, and you see a process that is fundamentally broken, you are now perfectly qualified to fix it.
You don't need to wait for a Silicon Valley developer to build it for you.
No, you are the developer now. The definition of a technical founder is rapidly expanding to include anyone who can logically structure a solution to a problem.
It's incredibly empowering, but at the same time, it kind of removes all the excuses. If you can build a business in 90 days, you can't really say, I don't have the resources anymore.
It puts the responsibility squarely on the individual, yes, but it also opens up the playing field globally in a way we've never seen. Remember, EON operates in 80 countries. Think about what this means for a bright student in a developing nation.
Right?
They don't need to fight for a visa to Silicon Valley to build a world-class startup anymore. They just need access to the platform.
That decentralization of innovation might honestly be the most disruptive part of all this. We aren't just exporting code anymore. We are exporting the raw ability to create economic value.
It creates a much more meritocratic global economy. The best ideas win, regardless of your zip code or your background.
So to wrap this up, we started with a headline that sounded almost impossible, zero to revenue in 90 days. But when you peel back the layers, it's not magic. It's just a highly optimized combination of a new infrastructure, which is VibeFlow,
Right.
a relentless focus on messy, real-world problems through their problem discovery framework, and an existing massive distribution network with the EON platform.
It is a systematic, step-by-step dismantling of the friction that usually kills early startups.
And it leaves us with a very different view of the future of education. It's no longer about hoarding theoretical knowledge in a classroom. It's about rapid, real-world application.
Knowledge is just potential energy. This model turns it into kinetic energy.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We've talked a lot today about the shift from the traditional 4-year degree to the 90-day sprint.
Yeah.
If this EON experiment succeeds, if we really can turn a total novice into a revenue-generating entrepreneur in a single quarter, are we looking at the end of the student identity entirely?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, maybe in the near future, we don't pause our lives to become students for 4 years at a time. Maybe we are all just entrepreneurs who are constantly learning in 90-day sprints. We solve one problem, learn exactly what we need to solve it, and then we just move to the next challenge.
Yep.
The line between learning and working just dissolves completely.
That is a fascinating future to think about. A whole world of perpetual builders.
I think I'd sign up for that.
I think we all would.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the EON Entrepreneur School. The world is changing fast, and the tools are getting sharper every day. It's up to you to pick them up.
Keep building out there.
We'll see you next time.